Good evening, everybody. Late start as anticipated by the tweet, but I'll confess it's later than I was expecting. This is actually purely due to my own little projects, but it did wind up taking longer than expected. So thank you all for your patience. We're going to be doing Cyberpunk tonight, which is kind of been a regular thing for the last little while. I do still want to do Against the Storm, but I feel like that'll be a really good option once I have, I don't know, just a little bit better handle on some of the other stuff that I want to do. So we're going to jump into the game right now. I'm hoping that there won't be any technical problems. Actually, it did occur to me I probably want to change something in the settings in the background just for a second here. Cool. And we're already tagged up with everything. So yeah, I'll get the usual disclaimers and all of that out of the way, but I also want to... Okay.
Good morning, Night City!
So, actually we can get the introductory material out of the way. I've actually made quite a bit of progress with my Streetkid. So, is there really just one corpo save? Guess so.
Howdy, howdy, Night City. Welcome back. My guest tonight is Lieutenant Sarah Kokoski, spokeswoman for the NCPD. Hi there. Welcome to the show.
But yeah, so let's just disclosure-wise, it is worth remembering that I was given a key. Oh, that's right, we did the brain dance. So I was given a key for this back when it was first released from GOG, who would like me to remind you that Cyberpunk is available to purchase on their sales platform, and I think they would really like you to buy it from that as opposed to any other platforms. Again, it's one of these ones where I feel if I'm going to accept a key from someone, that also means accepting the terms under which they're offering it. So in this case here, you know, there's the disclosure that you always want to do for someone, or just in general. You know, Cyberpunk, particularly a game like Cyberpunk, which is so highly anticipated on release, obviously is a thing of value. So obviously I was given that for the promotional purposes. But likewise, if a developer or, you know, or people giving me a key want me to say something, I need to consider, you know, whether or not that's something that I want to say. And I don't necessarily think it's unfair for someone to say, you know, we'd like you to encourage you to buy it off of our storefront. But with that in mind, I also don't necessarily think that they earn the right to my voice, like in the sense of it's not me saying that. I used to say that about GOG, and something changed about that. So in this case here, it's sort of up to you to decide where you'd like to buy things, but it is worth saying that this particular broadcast has been brought to you from a key which is from GOG, and they would appreciate it if you bought it from their storefront. So, my main reason for being late is actually, I think, partially interesting for people. So I'm going to, again, apologies to the YouTube crowd who probably do not find the digressions as interesting right off the bat. But slightly interesting given how some of the topics that we talk about during Cyberpunk. I've been going through Jake Vanderplas's book. It's definitely a very introductory level Python book called, I'm pretty sure it's just called Python for Data Science. And it's, I don't know, I probably would be wrong to call it out of date, but I think some of the stuff that they focus on would be considered maybe old-fashioned. Can I Assassin's Creed this? Maybe. Yeah. So I'm doing the fun, but sometimes things like that can be interesting. In fact, in this case here, because I think when I don't remember when that particular book was published, but when I take a look at the GitHub repository for it, the book is the second edition you have to buy. And actually, I noticed that it costs, I think, about $80 Canadian. And that was more than I wanted. I mean, again, I think it's cool to do introductory level stuff because, number one, it can help keep you sharp. So, for instance, I like going to Wooldridge's Introductory Econometrics textbook, Introductory Econometrics, A Modern Approach. And one of the reasons that's an interesting book to read is that even in the more introductory level stuff, you can actually pick up on some techniques that are easy to forget. There are some things that I've actually seen in that book that I've seen professionals mess up on in a work context too. So like for a serious problem. Now the consequences of the mess up I don't necessarily think were all that big, but that's not really the point. I think the point here is that like this is the sort of stuff that ideally you'd know. And more importantly, because it's in an introductory textbook, it'd also be fair to say that it's not like this information is particularly specialized or secret. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's nice to go back sometimes to some lower level material, because it's something that you should feel comfortable with, all things being equal. But it also gives you a chance to sort of make sure that you're that you're doing it right, that you're taking the time to sort of know why you're doing certain things. So anyways, that's why I'm doing this Python book, particularly because my knowledge of data science is mixed. I would sort of say that the sort of statistical elements I probably feel a bit more comfortable with, because of course that's something that you need to know to do econometrics. But there's a set of maybe not assumptions, but at least a certain set of expectations that maybe aren't as important or relevant when it comes to doing some of the more data science applications. And I think in some cases these are situations where data science projects could actually be improved by worrying about those things. But equally importantly, these are opportunities for me to recognize that an audience that is maybe following up on some work that I've done in that regard, they may have another set of priorities, and as a result, I would want to make sure that, especially if I'm trying to convince people, that I'm reaching people on their level. So anyways, long way of saying that it is helpful to pick up some things that are maybe what you'd kind of consider below your level. Because, I mean, in the end, if you're so clever, it shouldn't be that hard to do them. But the other thing that's very educational about this experience that I wasn't expecting was I am finding... Okay, let's see if we can mess these guys up. I'm finding, like I said, the repository is about 5 years old, at least the last contribution to it. And so there's a few libraries which have even gone to something like their 1.0 versions. And this means that certain... I don't think there are any functions that are deprecated, but I think it would be fair to say that a number of them
no
are...
hard feelings. Oh. Come on out.
Found the body.
Huh?
Yeah, the thing that's interesting about this one is that because some of the basically because some of the stuff is out of date, you have to sort of debug all of these programs. I don't even know if it really counts as a bug, but basically you need to bring them up to date with the current versions of the APIs. And that can be kind of educational because, of course, the author isn't maintaining that repository to keep it up. I mean, I'm assuming that the code examples in the second edition probably are correct. But I don't have the second edition, and I really don't see any value in spending $80 so I can have the updated version of the Thank you, Algrids. Yeah, no, I mean, the thing is, I tend to over-rely on stealth in this game, and that's partly because, I mean, I know I did put it on a hard difficulty, so I'm getting what I paid for, but I do tend to find I feel quite weak at the combat. Yeah, so number one, I think it's easy to underestimate how much work is, or like how much of the process of like doing a project is like debugging or otherwise just sort of like figuring your way out of like uninteresting but important problems. So like, you know, I know this thing is implementing this estimator that I want, but for one reason or another it's not doing the thing I want it to do. That's, you know, it would be nice if so much of our work was not that. But the fact of the matter is that unless you're using a commercial package, chances are there's going to be some stuff that you need to, you know, you need to do some maintenance on. Or at the very least, you just need to sort of divest yourself of the assumptions that you're making about how the thing works. So being able to use something like, you know, an example from a book, which, you know, was working in one version, but, you know, the API changed, that's valuable, especially because you know what the end result should look like, even though you don't necessarily, you haven't been given the sort of the pathway to that, you know, that final version. And the reason I say that is it's very easy to just sort of copy and paste examples, or even if you just type it out, but just to like type out without thinking examples from a book, and sort of convince yourself that you're not, or convince yourself that you're learning, when really all that you're doing is kind of bringing in somebody else's work. So having to do that work of sort of bringing things up to date with the most recent version of a package, I tend to find that stuff can be helpful, because it forces you to confirm that you actually know what the, you know, what the library is doing, the things that it's expecting. So anyways, the reason why the reason why I'm so late tonight is that I'm on the very final example. So it's a simple face detection, kind of a pipeline that they do. And for those of you familiar with machine learning things, like essentially what it does is it does this feature extraction method. I think it was originally intended for sort of like self-driving cars to identify pedestrians or something like that. But anyways, you apply it from the Cyberpunk image library. You take a whole bunch of examples of photos. So the scikit-learn has an example of faces. It's used elsewhere in the book. Then there's a number of image examples. You know, it's all well and good to come up with like a training set which has the faces, but you also want to have some negative examples as well. And so in this case, they bring together a number of different examples of images that don't have faces, and then you label it. And the way that they go about it is they train a support vector machine, a classifier, to detect faces or not. So my impression is that support vector machines are a lot less popular today than they were at the time that that book was written. And for those of you who don't know what they are, like, again, I can try and explain, but it's probably not as interesting or as important here. But it's a way of kind of coming up with a decision rule for classifying whether or not something is or isn't this particular category that you're looking for. And what I noticed was, first of all, the parameter that it's trained on was different. So there was one that the book got. So for those of you that have used scikit-learn, the C value is 4. And I think it's found on the test image there were like 33 different windows that would sort of identify a face in it. And in the case of the one that I trained, I added a few more C. Like basically what I noticed was that it, I think, was testing C's between like 1 to 8. And then I think it was doubling each time. So it like went 1, 1, 4. Well, I think there must have been 1, 2, 4, and 8. But what I noticed was that when I trained it, the C that produced the best value was 1, which sort of suggested to me that maybe it might be a good idea to add a few more on the left-hand side. So I just sort of halved. So I added like C 0.5, 0.25, you know, a couple others on the other side. Sure enough, the smaller I went, the more the model preferred these smaller values. And the cross-validation score was very good. So then I take a look at the like the result, and for whatever reason this classifier is now detecting like collars. It is doing a very good job of detecting collars and doing a terrible job of detecting faces. And to be honest with you, I don't have a good answer why. I was thinking, okay, maybe there's a couple of things I noticed. They had this big library of images, and they like took all of them and turned them into grayscale. And I noticed that the ones that I was working with weren't like that. Like basically, the creation of the training and test data sets were different. So I'm like, okay, that might be a difference. Then I was like, well, you know, then there's this whole like training procedure that I did on it. So maybe if I bring it back to, you know, maybe if I force it to have like a C of 4, that'll work. And I mean, long story short, for one reason or another, this thing just seems to be determined to find collars, and I can't quite figure out why. Which of course says to me that probably I haven't understood this particular application that well, because clearly face recognition is something that we take for granted. It's actually something that I believe you can take by default on Apple's tools. So I think they have a machine learning tool where, like, if you want to detect a face, you just call that in their API. They'll do that for you. And obviously they've got a massive corpus that they've sort of trained everything on. So, you know, they're essentially you use their classifier rather than doing this yourself. But of course the point here is to learn these tools. And basically what happened, there's another drawback, which was I did all of the problems in the book in one big Jupyter notebook. And I think when I load it up in GitHub, it's like 14 megabytes now. So, obviously, when I run this thing, I've got a good laptop I'm running this on, but it's just chugging in the browser now. So, like, to a point where I'll, like, type a line of code, and, like, I can just turn over and, like, do something else for a little while as everything kind of comes in. I don't think it's really intended to be using, like, really big and elaborate notebooks like that. So that's another lesson that I learned in terms of the limitations of a Jupyter notebook. So, long story short, I come to you belatedly just because in the end, I've got this, I think, very interesting problem, but ultimately one that proved fairly time-consuming to get a grip on. So I eventually decided to cut my losses and stream for you tonight. But for those of you who are interested in these things, you know, I'm happy to share the book that I'm working from. But I would say I actually think this probably is less useful as a teaching tool now. I kind of feel like there might be some better examples now that. You know, now that I'm realizing the limitations of the... Sorry, now that I'm sort of realizing the limitations of the like just the age, sorry, of the yeah, I wish it were squeezing every cycle out of the processor, but in truth, what's like it's web, like, so I really like Jupyter. There's a programmer, Joel Gruss, who has a rather good talk actually on why he doesn't like notebooks, and I don't even necessarily disagree with his points. I just tend to find that the way I use Jupyter notebooks tend not to fall into the problems that he highlights in that talk. But unfortunately, it does seem to be the case that I, like, you know, there's only so much you can really get from a web-based, like, it's not Visual Studio Code, and what, like, in reality, the better way for me to have worked with this, and this is going to be the way that I do it first, is either to open up like an IPython or some equivalent to IPython, which is in reality the notebook. But probably what would be better is for me to have like a text file, something where I'm like writing a Python program, something that's like .py, and that'll be where like the functions and everything go, the majority of the work. And then the notebook is basically going to be where I write the notes to myself so I understand what the hell this thing is doing. And then the functions and the results. And in fact, one other thing that I could potentially do is just break it up the way that the book is broken up, like by chapters. And that would probably help cut things down. Because like in the end, I mean, like, I don't know, how many like 20 megabyte web pages do you load in your web browser and have them be really responsive? So not exactly. I mean, the code would still be commented, but like if you're not familiar with them, like basically Jupyter notebooks are, you can kind of think of them, the way you might want to think about them would be like, imagine some kind of interactive prompt. So this could be the same as like loading up Python and typing in a command, or you could even like think of it as a command line. But instead of it being like this constant sort of terminal session, you've got the part for your code, whether it's a single function or you're like defining a function and doing like multiple things in a step. And instead of it going to standard output, the result is sort of displayed in a web page below. So there's some magic commands that you can do which would like show an image, which is obviously something you can't do in a terminal. Like the terminal's not going to show you, if like, let's just say for the sake of the argument, I decide to clone Stable Diffusion, and I make whatever wild and wonderful changes I do, I want, and then I run it, and for whatever reason, I don't save the image. I just want that thing to be displayed. If I do that in a terminal, it's not going to show. I mean, maybe there's some like weird, maybe there's some weird shell that does do that, but so far as I can tell, that's not something that's reasonable to expect. Whereas a notebook, right, if the output is, let's say, a plot from, Matplotlib or Seaborn or something like that, when you run it, your plot will show up just down below. And I find that really helpful, right, because half the time when I'm doing a plot, it's part of exploring the data. Like, there's some value in, first of all, looking at the actual observation, but most of the time, at least, for economic data, we're lucky enough now. I mean, I guess if you're doing like, post-World War II, national accounts, if you're doing like annual GDP or something like that, you're not going to have that many observations. But the, for the most part, like what I'm dealing with would be thousands of observations. And then, I don't know how many columns or variables or features, depending on what, I notice that people from different domains have different different names for them. usually we call it the dependent variable and independent variable, although I usually call it like the y and the x's because all the examples, like the outcome is y and the right-hand side is denoted x. But like y and x doesn't mean anything if you haven't read the same textbook, so even then that's a really bad example. But so like, taking a look at the data is good. Even some summary statistics aren't bad. So, mean, standard deviation, median. It is definitely helpful to look at quantiles. But that has its limits. So if you're not familiar with this, a really good lesson for actually plotting your data would be to look at Anscombe's quartet. And essentially what Anscombe's quartet is, there are four series. They have like the same summary statistics, like they'll have the same mean, they'll have the same standard deviation. And yet when you plot them, like when you visually look at them, or visualize them is what I mean to say. Like when you look at it as something other than a number, they are very, very different. But the lesson of Anscombe's quartet, of course, is that chances are we aren't doing that. It actually takes a little bit of deprogramming to say that it's more than just like a number. And you do actually want, there's value in plotting things out and figuring things out that way. So, again, notebooks are really helpful for doing that sort of iteration, because of course, like, what's my alternative? Well, again, I'm either working in a terminal or I'm, in an IDE or something like that, and then I run the program that's gonna give me a visualization. It's not hard, and Seaborn makes it even easier. But in the end, I'm sort of saving a file in a folder, and then I open up that file. And again, double-clicking on something is not the end of the world, right? It's not the hardest problem in computer science to open a file that I've just generated, but it is pulling me out of my development environment in order to be able to take a look at the result. And that's not something that happens when I use a piece of professional software like, say, Stata. So being able to work with a Jupyter notebook, or you don't even necessarily have to have a computer to do this. Well, you don't need to run this on your computer to do it. You need a computer to access it. But like if you use Google Colab, it's the same thing, and you just run it on Google's computers. And again, just being able to have the visualization appear in the same, basically the same window where you're running things, it sort of lets you just kind of keep your flow, right? You have this flow of ideas, and you sort of have this record of what you've been doing as you go along. So again, all good things. The only thing is, again, I've basically done a book's worth of exercises, and a lot of them do involve visualizations, and a lot of them do involve, fairly elaborate, projects. Like I said, I mean, it's about 14, 18 megabytes now, and I just personally can't really think of a lot of 14 or 18 megabyte web pages that I visit, let alone, those ones that run particularly fast. So, it's on me, but it's better that I learn that lesson now rather than when I have a serious project that I'm doing. It's just one of those things, you burn your hand on the stove. I said hi. Burn your hand on the stove once. And
if I ever see her again. New job's been tough on her lately.
Some water. You got Saint Rousseau?
Oof. Boss. Water? You don't want something with taste? Water's for the animals. People didn't invent sugar just to drink.
You freeze up a lot?
1 second, boss. Brad? Hey, Brad! Listen, boss, you help me out? Kids on the block been up my ass lately, and you seem real tough.
Might as well, since I'm here. Lead the way.
Thanks, boss. All right, follow me. You lost your minds? Get your grubby paws off my bike!
You think we're playing around? This is a small price to pay for fucking treason.
You still can't let go of that? Shana made a choice. You should be proud of her.
Proud? That bitch sold out to a fucking corp! Now it's time for payback. Fuck you want? This ain't none of your biz. You another corporal rat?
Relax. Don't got any beef with you. For now. What happened?
Your new pal here talked his sister into taking a job at Zetatech. Bitch just leaves, doesn't even say bye. We've been running these streets ever since we were kids. Hacking street vending machines, fucking up corpos. It's what we live for. And what? Now she's too good for us? Double-crossing cunt!
You listen to yourselves? And how's stealing from poor folk like me gonna make things better? Shana's a grown-ass woman now. You should follow her example.
You getting back a corpse by stealing from a street vendor? Says a lot about you. Now back the fuck away from him.
Or you'll do what?
I could break your jaw, fracture your skull, shoot you. The possibilities are endless.
You care so much about a rat fucking traitor, and you can die together. Yo, Brad, ain't that... Yo, that's the dude everyone been talking about. When they came back from the dead. You know how many gunks he's offed already? And I ain't even talking solo. Shit, he following us?
Have they lost their damn minds? Thanks, boss. That ought to teach him.
Just between the two of us, you really proud your sisters joined the Zetatech fold?
Look, I know what you're thinking. Corps are exploiting us. They're turning us into slaves. That's what people say, no? Well, guess what? They never have to worry about putting food on table. Me and Shana take whatever we can get.
She's probably running on neurostims. You not worried?
Hey, you can't have it all. And even if we did, nobody'd get off their ass and do anything.
Well, when you put it that way. Now that that's over, you okay?
Who, me? Couldn't be better. All talk and no action. Maybe they should go get a job. Fucking parasites. Well, at least Shana can focus on her job now. No one in the family ever got as high up as her. Anyway, stop by whenever you're around. I throw in a nice discount for you.
Will do, boss. Thanks.
If you can just give me a quick second here. I caught something... I just got something in my messages which I probably don't need to deal with, but I would like to just make sure I didn't... Okay, cool. Okay, I am ready to give you my only partially divided attention now. But yeah, I mean, I kind of already gave the machine learning stuff, I kind of already dealt with that to death, but the one problem I have noticed that I run into is that, especially when I have a problem like that, my tendency is to... I think we're gonna do this side job first because it doesn't have a difficulty label. So I tend to want to... Like, my tendency is to, like, really put a strong effort into wrapping the thing up before moving on to the next project. And clearly there was more for me to... there's clearly more for me to do there, right? Like, there was... once it was clear that the thing was like behaving in a very regular fashion and that I wasn't making an obvious mistake, like, you know, in the end I am copying, or not like copying, but I am just sort of parroting back a certain amount of the code that's in the book. And once it was clear that it wasn't sort of a transcription error, I probably should have just wrapped it up and moved on for tonight. But I do get a little bit stubborn when it comes to that sort of stuff, just because in the end, it's nice to try and follow a train of thought to its finish.
What can I get for you? Something hot, cold, coffee, liquor.
Pass on the coffee. I'll have a spunky monkey instead.
Everyone listen up. This is a fucking robbery. Mr. Slick, behind the counter? Yeah, you! Shut the fuck up. Put your hands up where I can see them. Rest of you!
Somebody likes being the center of attention.
What part of keeping your fucking mouth shut did you not understand? How about you go first? Hand over your wallet. Nice and easy.
Can't believe you've made it this far.
You and your shit again?
People who don't judge their competition don't last too long in the streets. I've met people like you before. They're all dead now. Know why? Because none of them could get the spec on me.
Nice try. You're bluffing. Trying to trip me up.
I've danced at Maelstrom and Arasaka. You think you could so much as scratch me? You'll die before you can pull that trigger. I guarantee you.
Fuck it. Let's bail.
I am apparently the unluckiest man in Night City
For years,
who...
nobody touches this place, and now this? Where's 6th Street when you need them? Thank God you were here. Order whatever you want. It's on the house.
Just show up to places and they get robbed. The thing about... So, number one, I actually haven't used ChatGPT. I've used the Bing implementation of the OpenAI stuff, but I haven't actually used... GPT in any of its forms. The tricky part about that one is that the problem that I'm actually working with seems to be derived... Like, the problem is very specifically because of how the libraries that are being used have changed between when that book was written and when... Actually, you know what? I can probably find the year that this thing was written. Just give me 1 second here. This might be educational. So. So I know the second edition of this thing came out in 2022. Unfortunately, the website for this does not have... So actually, if you use the Colab notebooks, they also run into the same errors. So you actually need to... the author... release the text under the MIT license and sort of some Creative Commons. Sorry, it was the text of the book is released under Creative Commons. The code is released on the MIT license. But apparently the text doesn't have a copyright year, which, fair enough, I mean, it is Creative Commons. So when I take a look at the GitHub repository. I guess there isn't an option for oldest, is there? So last update was 5 years ago, so that would have been... my God, I can't remember it. I guess that would be like 2018 or something like that. But I'm noticing... So the initial commit was back in 2016. So yeah, I mean, anywhere between 2016 and 2018. And I mean, it's one thing I know for sure that's changed. Pandas went to 1.0 over that period. That's not the source of the problem. What's likely the problem is somewhere between scikit-learn and scikit-image. Something's changed with the images that are being used in the example. Like, the thing here is, if I rely on ChatGPT to do, like, so if I just tell ChatGPT, hey, give me a support vector machine based base detection algorithm, I don't even doubt that it would, it would provide some code to do that. But the problem is that I wouldn't learn the same things that I would learn from that text. What I would learn is the way that, ChatGPT, and I mean, I guess GitHub has Codepilot now, right? I would learn what it thinks is the solution, whereas the lesson I should be learning is, number one, like, so step one should be, do I understand what this procedure is doing? Because obviously, if I'm expecting the same result as the book and it's giving me a different result, something's happened to my understanding in terms of what this code is doing, or something has changed in terms of the inputs that I'm giving it, and I don't understand the change in those inputs. I got a few likely candidates for that, and it's very likely related to the data in the scikit-image library. But again, it's the scikit-image is gone. I think it's on version like 0.20 compared to I think it would have been something like 0.14, 0.13. So there's like 6 versions that have been released since then. And again, it's a little bit of a detective. It's a little bit of a detective job to work through. The other the one drawback is it doesn't tell me the versions of the library that it was using originally. That would have been helpful, because then I can just force it back to those older versions and ensure that the program was actually doing what they said it did. But let's assume that the guy wrote it correctly and that the results that he got were in fact the ones that are displayed in those books, and I suspect that that's true. In the end, the lesson here is less about doing the correct facial detection thing, and it's more about how can I look at this old code and update it. So, like, let's just assume that this was my job, right? This is to be honest, one of the things I like to do before contacting someone I know who is rather good at these things is to pretend like this is my job. I need to solve this problem, right? Like, this is what they're paying me for. And again, it doesn't mean that you turn yourself off from opportunities to get help, but being able to treat it like the boss is watching and they're making an evaluation as to whether or not you can continue doing this, or they're going to evaluate as to whether or not you can move up on the basis of your skill. Being able to sort of handle a scenario like that is one of the better learning experiences. So again, I'll figure it out. It's just, I was kind of stubborn on it and worked my way through. Yeah, I don't know. At work, I noticed that they're pushing more of the AI tools to like write stuff, particularly among like, there's a few people who are there's a few people who like would like to they'd like to learn they like to become a bit more skilled at programming, or at the very least they need to become a bit more skilled in programming, because it's not they're not quite able to handle some of the tasks that that they have in front of them. And like, that's fine. Like, that's life, right? That happens. It's not a bad thing for them. At work, they are pushing a lot of, oh, that's right. This is one that proved too difficult for me. I'm going to give this one another shot, just because I have gotten another level or two. But I may need to turn around and try something different. And I'm not 100% on that method of learning. I'm sure it's helpful, and I just kind of need to. I just need to sort of wrap my head around where the real benefit is, but I don't know. I am having a little trouble. Right, I don't know why the game was recommending. I'm having a little trouble just because there have been a couple of times when it gave me a very certain answer, let's say, but one that clearly wasn't true. And I guess in the end, I sort of wonder, like, if that's what I'm up against, right? If the things that I know, I'm getting answers like that, then, like, am I really learning something putting my hands into this? Like, my own sort of feeling on the AI tools are that you are responsible for verifying the answers. And so the advantage to it is it helps you do things faster. And then what your job to do is, it's a little bit like if you hire an assistant, right? Like you give your assistant a well-defined task, and you expect them to do their best. But in the end, you have some method of sort of quality control to make sure that the task has been performed to your satisfaction. And I think one of the things. When was the last time I fucked anything up, huh? Well, I screwed up. It was a melee range grenade. Oops. Alright, let's not try to do that. But yeah, I don't know. Like, my own feeling on it is, you treat it like an assistant. Treat it like somebody who you would want to have some... I mean, like any job, right? You would want some layer of quality control to sort of make sure that the job is being performed to specification. And in the end, you are saving time rather than using it as sort of a replacement. I think probably what I want to do now, if all of the gigs I'm running into are high difficulty, I should probably be going outside the city limits to find my next assignment. And I mean, again, like, there's... I'm obviously not the last word in how to do this sort of stuff, but I just sort of feel like that's probably the most straightforward way to avoid sort of burning yourself with over-reliance on something that does have a tendency to be a little dodgy in some of its answers. I really messed up the angle here. It's also, too, like, there is a... So I guess the example I could maybe take for this would be if you think of how, if you think about how people use tools like Wolfram Alpha in like university. So for those of you who are not familiar with Wolfram Alpha, so there's a company called Wolfram. I think it might be called Wolfram Research actually, but founded by Stephen Wolfram, who's a bit of a kind of a hotshot. At, I think it was Caltech originally, left academia, worked in sort of physics. And that, I mean, it's also worth to remembering, like, physics was still, like, I mean, not that physics isn't hot now, but, like, definitely, like, a really prestigious and like a very competitive environment. So, you know, he's kind of this child prodigy that's sort of shaming all the other PhDs running around. Guy certainly is not wanting for confidence, let's say. That's maybe the nice way of putting it. But ultimately left academia to pursue this firm, Wolfram.
V, I have a job. The urgent kind. Someone is yanking my friend's drones out of the sky. Check out the coordinates. Find out who is responsible. The details are attached.
And one of the major pieces of software that this firm produces is called Mathematica. And it's a computer algebra system. So you might have used some, if any of you've done like a calculus course. There's in Canada, I mean, this company is still a going concern. I think it's owned by a Japanese conglomerate now, though. There's a computer algebra system called Maple. And then I think there's a free and open source version called Sage Math. And it's running Python in the background. If you're a Python maven, another example of this would be SymPy. Although I think SymPy is maybe a little less friendly to use than Mathematica. But the thing that's nice about Mathematica is that it does, like, again, it's a computer algebra system, right? So what those kinds of tools can do for you is you could define a problem. So, like, let's say, you know, like a nasty integration problem that you're having some difficulty making sense of. And, like, let's even say that, I mean, some of these things may not have some numerical solution to them, right? Because oftentimes when you're working in university, it's no longer, you know, 2 plus x equals 5, what is x? Very oftentimes what you're trying to do is sort of find out something about a function, you know, or, you know, you're trying to define something over a range or whatever. Like, obviously, just finding the value is not the most interesting part about some of these problems. So one thing that can be helpful about something like Mathematica is you can put in a problem like that, define it, you know, integrate from, you know, x1 to x2 or whatever, and it will give you back a symbolic answer, and you can use it to simplify something as well. So if you want, you know, like, let's say you're given some really complicated, or actually another example of this would be like you're given some equation or some function or whatever. And, you know, sorry, I should give a specific example here. Like, one other problem that you would probably find even in high school would be something like find the roots of something. And you can do that, right? And there's a few different ways that you can approach it. So, like, one thing is if you just want an answer that you can put in your on your homework and hand it in, you can use Mathematica to get the answer. And if they ask, you know, if you need to express it as a variable, it'll give it to you as a variable. You just need to let it know that x is a variable. And if you need to give it as a specific numeric value, you can actually take the symbolic one, the symbolic version, and then you can just define, you know, x is equal to a certain number, and then, you know, solve it that way. And then it'll give you the value. It'll give it to you in a fraction. You can ask for a decimal version. You know, it's a very helpful tool. And of course, the actual use for this sort of thing is usually for very difficult problems where maybe they don't have these nice tidy solutions because they're not homework problems. And, you know, you use it for real world applications. But, you know, use it for whatever, right? It's your software, you paid for it, you can use it. But the way that it can be helpful, right? So let's say you've got the find the roots problem. Well, one of the things you might want to do with Mathematica is, like, you're really struggling to try and make some sense of this, you know, this object that you've been given, this mathematical object. And so, you know, you put it into Mathematica and maybe you do simplify. And it's maybe going to express it in this nice, you know, x squared plus, like, something you could, you know, use the quadratic formula on. And then you're saying, it's like, okay, so I know how to solve this if I can get it in this form, and I know that this form exists for this problem now because I've seen it in Mathematica. How do I go from what I saw, you know, in the textbook to the simplified version. And then Wolfram Alpha is basically this web-based interface to what's basically a Mathematica session. One of the features it has is actually a step-by-step solution, so you can use it to solve homework. Now, again, like, it's up to you to decide how you want to use these tools. You can basically do what's the equivalent of finding the solutions manual online, or like doing your homework by looking at all the answers in the back. I mean, obviously most textbooks don't give like the even numbered answers, so you can't do that sort of thing. But like, again, it's easy to cheat nowadays, right? Cheating is not the hardest thing. It's the easier path in the short run. Obviously you get to a workplace, if it's a serious job, they're going to wonder, why you don't know these very fundamental things. But I mean, let's face it, we've all been in workplaces where people like that wind up becoming managers because they're really good at like making nice with people and getting them to do their homework for them and stuff like that. But the profitable way to use tools like that, I'm not one of these people who thinks that you should just not use those things. It's silly not to, like, just similarly with the AI tools, like, there's clearly something valuable in what they're doing. But what you really want to do is you want to use them as opportunities to either do something faster, or you want to use them as a way of simplifying the problem to identify the thing that you can't figure out. So, just like I have that math example where if you want, you can get the solution, but instead what you can do is you can use it as sort of this step-by-step process to figure out where from the original statement of the problem to the solution you're struggling with what you're doing. Likewise, you can use these tools to try and give you a little bit of a leg up, or to give you an opportunity to sort of say, hey, this is where I'm reading what this tool has told me, and I actually don't think that's right. And of course, because you have the research tools yourself, you can then go and verify whether or not this thing it told you was actually correct. And to me, like, that's where the biggest advantage to using those tools are. But I mean, again, like, I don't use them that much. So it's hard to say that I'm using them very profitably. And I think in the end, I mean, presumably if there's a big advantage that I'm sort of denying myself here, I'm going to find out when other people are just doing better work than me as a result of as a result of those tools. We'll see. But yeah, for my part, I don't know, it's like video games, right? I like figuring stuff out in a video game myself, even if I'm thick about it. It's nice to struggle with a problem and realize, it's nice to struggle with a problem and just sort of like mentally debug the process. It's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of like, okay, here's the example I'll give. It's not hard to summarize Animal Farm, right? Actually, here, this will be a fun little experiment. The new Bing. Okay, we'll go for balanced. Actually, we can get a precise answer. Responses are factual and concise, prioritizing accuracy and relevance. Balanced responses are reasonable and coherent, balancing accuracy and creativity. Responses are original and imaginative, creating surprise and entertainment for you. Okay, let's go for precise. So, happens in the... Please summarize the plot of George Animal Farm. Animal Farm is an allegorical novella by George Orwell published in England on 17th August 1945. The book tells the story of a group of farm animals who rebel against their human farmer, hoping to create a society where animals can be equal, free, and happy. The animal populace of the poorly run manor farm near Willingdon, England, is ripened for rebellion by neglect at the hands of the irresponsible and alcoholic farmer Mr. Jones. One night, the exalted boor, Old Major, holds a conference at which he calls for the overthrow of humans and teaches the animals a revolutionary song. After Old Major's death, 2 young pigs, Snowball and Napoleon, assume command and lead the animals in a successful revolt against the humans. The animals create a new society where the pigs, who are the most intelligent animals, are the leaders. The pigs, however, become corrupted by power and a new tyranny is established. The book ends with the pigs becoming indistinguishable from the humans they have overthrown. I hope that helps. Let me know if you have any other questions. Let's actually go for what it recommends here. What is the meaning of the book? Animal Farm is an allegory of the events of the Russian Revolution of 1917 and the early years of the Soviet Union. The book is a satire of totalitarianism and the dangers of a communist state. The book is also a warning against the dangers of political power and corruption that comes with it. The pigs in the book represent the ruling class of the Soviet Union. The book is a commentary on the corruption of power and the dangers of the totalitarian state. I hope that helps. Let me know if you have any other questions. So I just need to find the name. There's Mr. Pilkington. God, who is the other? Okay, well, actually, let's see what Big says. I remember there was a farmer named Mr. Farm. What was the name of the other farmer? I'm actually being deliberately vague on this one. Because I'm specifically thinking of the farmer that stands in for Germany. And there's more than one other farmer, so I want to see whether or not this correctly identifies the other neighboring farm. Ah, nice. The other farmer in Animal Farm is Mr. Frederick. Mr. Frederick is the owner of Pinchfield Farm, a neighboring farm to Animal Farm. He is known for being cruel to his animals and for entertaining himself with cockfighting. Napoleon allies with Frederick to sell surplus timber, that Pilkington also sought, but is enraged to learn that Frederick paid him in counterfeit money. If the book is about corruption of power and the is of a totalitarian. Oop. Jesus, I can't spell. Totalitarian state. What? Let's do Mr. Mr. Pilkington and Mr. Frederick are symbols for the West, the US and the UK, and Germany, respectively. Both Pilkington and Mr. Frederick are worried that the revolutionary spirit might spread to their own animals. Their rivalry with each other, however, prevents them from working together against Animal Farm. They merely spread rumors about the farm's inefficiency and moral reprehensibility. I hope that helps. Let me know if you have any other questions. Now, I don't actually really think that this answered the question, though. But anyways. Actually, here's an interesting one. What does Beasts of Land sound like? Beasts of England is a song that Old Major teaches the other animals as a philosophy of animalism. The tone of the song is stirring and enthusiastic as a means of encouraging the animals to come together to overthrow man, their sworn enemy. The upbeat and positive tone is reinforced by words like bright, joyful, and shine. I hope that helps. So it's described actually as, what was it, Clementine and La Cucaracha. What I notice is if you hear recordings of Beasts of England, most people will focus on the Clementine part. So it's like, Beasts of England, Beasts of Ireland. That's not upbeat. You gotta have the La Cucaracha in it too. So you probably go for something like Beasts of England, Beasts of Ireland, Beasts of every land and clime. You can kind of imagine the animals sort of marching to something like this, right? Sorry, I realize my singing voice is non-existent. And actually, the one in the animated film is haunting. It's a freaky song. But anyways, there's a point to why I'm doing this. We can jump back to the game. You can get a pretty good summary of what happens in Animal Farm. Actually, there was one other one that I wanted to do.